Pro Football Focus. Big fans of the San Francisco 49ers dropped their positional rankings very high in most positional groups. Kind of low, maybe too low in one, but one especially shocking ranking. Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers. We love it when you subscribe on YouTube or anywhere in your podcasts. And today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Happy 4th, by the way, to everybody out there. Hope you all have a safe and happy holiday weekend. Croc, you got anything special in store for this weekend? Maybe he's throwing some meat on the grill. I know it's 111 degrees or whatever it is in Stockton, so I think I'm heading into the heat as well. Might not want to add more to that heat, barbecuing outside. We'll see, maybe eating indoors this year.
Hey, you know what? Real quick, I want to address something because just now you said barbecuing outdoors. And the funny thing is, and it might be just a California thing. When we talk about grilling, right, getting on the grill, we say barbecuing. Like even if you're not
actually grilling, yeah,
even if you're not actually using barbecue,
yeah.
When I was in Arkansas, they laughed at me for that. They thought that was funny that I say that I just consider when you're cooking outdoors and you're using a grill, we call it barbecuing.
Yeah,
and they don't.
I think actually more than anything, we don't really necessarily call the cooking part the barbecue. We call the party the barbecue out here. And I think that's kind of where it really starts to, because we know we're grilling, but the whole party is just called a barbecue. You know, say, hey, we're going to have a barbecue. Nobody expects you to have like the slow cooker with 3 days worth of, but there's a lot of slow cooking going on now these days and a lot of smoking going on these days, more so than there used to be. But people don't expect that. People know what you mean when you say barbecue. Someone's going to be cooking some meat and everyone's going to hang out and have some beverages and we're going to hang out outside. The barbecue is the party, not the actual cooking.
Right. So take that. All my people in Arkansas that made fun of me. My girl, Sam Rawls Tucker. I'm saying your full name. Her specifically. She got on me about that. But I'm glad that you said that. So I'm like, I know I ain't tripping.
No. And look, who cares? Who cares what people are calling
but,
it? You know how to cook. Because I've had some bad barbecue. And I've had some great barbecue. And I've had some bad grilling. I've had some good grilling. So as long as you're a master of your craft, that's what counts.
Well, I will say, I mean, I am not a master of my craft when it comes to barbecue grilling. So probably won't catch me outdoors doing any of that. I kind of like cook for myself because if it's bad, like I'll still eat it. But I think we're going to the movies. Actually, when we're recording right now, it's July 3rd, going to the movies with, the wife, kids, all that, to see Despicable Me, the new one. I think it comes out today. So we'll be checking that out.
That's smart. Always nice and cool in the movie theater.
Yeah.
It's a good move, bro.
I'm excited to eat the popcorn, to be honest.
I'm a big popcorn guy. I actually don't really like the movie theater popcorn because I make my own popcorn. And every other popcorn I've ever had now is subpar. Because I pop it myself on the stovetop, get the oil going, get the kernels in there, go a little salt and pepper and cayenne pepper. That's the way I like to do it.
Okay, so you're really in it. This isn't even the top secret butter.
No,
explosive.
It's microwave stuff all the way out of here. No, I'm popping it on the stovetop. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the only way to go. Once you start doing it and you get it down, you can't eat other popcorn anymore. Take my popcorn seriously. Pro Football Focus takes their grades seriously, and they have dropped their position by position grades. Let's start with the worst and go to the offensive side of the ball because there are some really high grades here. The 49ers ranking 1 and 2 in almost every position group, except Croc, offensive line. The Niners all the way down at 24 out of 32 teams for their offensive line. And Trent Williams, we all know, is great. He's great with PFF grades as well. He was the highest graded player in the entire league last year, kind of broke their system with how good he was. 92.6 grade, which is phenomenal this year, and still the class of the NFL as a left tackle. But as my colleague and my co-host for Peacock and Williamson says, it's Trent Williams and the Pips, according to PFF. And The next highest graded offensive lineman on the 49ers was Feliciano. He had a 79.8 grade, which is a really good grade, but he wasn't a full-time starter all year for the 49ers, kind of took over that job. And then we saw him miss time in the Super Bowl, which probably hurt the 49ers because they had some busts up front after he left the game. So John Feliciano, the second best. Nobody else has a grade over 65, 66 on the entire offensive line. So that's why the 49ers grade so low. It's because they're strong on the left side. And even Aaron Banks, who I would consider not an issue or anything, was only a 65 grade. He played through some injuries last year, which I think hurt him a little bit, but not high on the 49ers overall, despite having one of the league's best still in Trent Williams on the left side. 24, though, seemed a little low because as a group, I think they play at least middle of the pack.
And the tough thing with this is they don't factor in the quarterback play behind the offensive line. So, I think one thing that really helps is really a couple of things. One, the scheme. Two, the guy that's orchestrating this scheme. And I'm not talking about Kyle Shanahan. I'm talking about the quarterback. I think Brock Purdy's ability to do what Kyle wants, which is playing rhythm, timing, right? Like this offense, more so than some others, is heavily dependent on timing, getting that ball out at the right time and hitting those windows, which create those big run after catch opportunities. Well, Brock Purdy, again, if you go back to his scouting report, that was exactly what they said he needed to be successful. An offense that's more play action based, that is predicated more on timing and rhythm, as opposed to a drop back passing offense, which we're saying that the 49ers need to improve on. So when you get to the offensive line and maybe them not being great, right? They're not these big maulers or anything like that. Why have the 49ers been able to still be like the most efficient offense in the league every year? Why they have the number one rusher as well as the most efficient passer in the league. The reason why is because it's timing, rhythm, and then having a quarterback, Brock Purdy, being able to execute that aspect of it. So I think that takes the 49ers offensive line, which is not great. It's not great. We saw a breakdown in the Super Bowl, but from a 24th ranked team to really a team that performs at more of a top 5 level. And when I say performs, I just mean being able to mask areas where they need to improve, being able to mask areas that are deficiencies. They can work around that because of how the system is set up for those guys.
Let me put it this way. According to Pro Football Focus pass blocking grades, after Trent Williams, the next highest in pass blocking grade with only 14 pass block sets on the season was backup tackle Matt Pryor. And then after that, it's Kyle Juszczyk and Juwan Jennings. And then George Kittle's top 6. And so you can kind of see where there's not a lot of offensive linemen and no starting offensive linemen on the list after Trent Williams until you get to John Feliciano. Like we've got all the wide receivers, all the tight ends on the list as far as pass blocking grades until you get to John Feliciano, who graded much better as a run blocker than a pass blocker. And so literally no starting offensive lineman or big time contributor offensive lineman on the 49ers had a pass blocking grade higher than 63.5 except for Trent Williams.
Now, here's a big question about the offensive line. The 49ers drafted Dominic Puni in the 3rd round. And a lot of people assumed he's going to step right in and potentially replace John Feliciano. Feliciano, the second highest graded offensive lineman for the 49ers right there, and plays the position that Puni is playing. Is there any chance? Do you see any type of positional battle with the left guard spot for like Aaron Banks? He did not grade out well. Now, you talked about the injuries, trying to play through that. That definitely could have factored into it, not knowing how much the injuries were, really affecting him throughout the season. But let's just take the PFF grade for what it is and say, you know what, Banks, you would have liked to see him play a little bit better. Is there a chance that it's not Feliciano that gets replaced? Maybe Feliciano ends up, he got the 1-year contract. Maybe they end up giving him another 2-3 years down the line. So you have him for the next, 3 to 4 years. Maybe it's Aaron Banks, a guy that eventually you're going to actually have to either sign or replace. You have to make a decision on him. I believe after like this season. Do you think that maybe Aaron Banks is a guy that Puni might be able to really compete with for a starting guard spot?
Yeah. To answer your question, I don't think it's either one. I think what the 49ers are doing is what they did with Aaron Banks and his predecessor is I think Puni's going to come in. He's going to back up the guard spots. I think it's going to be Feliciano at right guard, and it's going to be Aaron Banks at left guard. And then they're going to let Aaron Banks walk as a free agent because they can't afford to pay guard a whole lot of money. And man, guards cashed in last offseason. I think the 49ers saw that and were like, well, we're not going to pay Aaron Banks $15 million a year, something crazy. So I think Pooney is going to be the 2025 starting left guard. I think that is the plan. Or maybe 2025 starting right guard because, Burford's not the guy. And then Feliciano isn't around anymore. And then you end up paying and figuring out a way to pay Aaron Banks, or maybe Pooney's the starting center in 2025. But I think it's a 2025 plan for Pooney. He'll be a key backup this year. He'll have a chance to play more than Aaron Banks did as a rookie, I think. But if I had to guess, and if Pooney did somehow look amazing and ready to go in camp and earned a starting job, I would say probably it's at right guard and Feliciano moves over to center. So I think Feliciano's locked into a starting job. It depends how they shuffle up. My guess is it's the same starting lineup that the Niners had in the Super Bowl last year. And then you have Pooney kind of waiting in the wings and developing and a key backup player. But, going forward, I think they do have some needs on the interior, and Pooney could be left guard, right guard, or center of the future.
Do you think that's an issue? Like just returning essentially the whole starting offense from a season ago?
I don't think so. I think Banks is fine. I think Brendel, for what he is, a journeyman type, is good. I think Feliciano obviously was maybe the second best lineman for the 49ers last year. I think they're fine there, and that's where you can coach up tough, smart guys. And then you got Pooney competing as well. I think they're fine in the interior. I would worry more about Colton McKivitz actually being the guy on the outside and what the 49ers are doing long-term at tackle. I don't think there was really anything to do for them to be immediately great at tackle unless they found a first-round rookie that was ready to step right in and win a job and be better than Colton McKivitz from week one. They didn't see that player out there, so I think it was still a future position on the offensive line. And so they're going to go with continuity there up front, in my opinion. And it's not a great offensive line in total, but they can help out on the weak parts and then lean on the good parts of the line, run left when they need to. And so I think it'll be fine. I think it plays up certainly higher than 24, but probably a middle of the road overall offensive line. And it is something they need to address, I think, going forward. I thought they could have done more in this draft. They thought differently. So we'll see how that goes going forward. Next, Croc, we got to talk D-line, running backs, wide receivers, corners, or linebackers, defensive backs, all ranked 1 or 2 in the entire league, according to Pro Football Focus. One of those quite shocking. Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Super easy. You go to the app, you look at the seats, you got a view of your seats before you sit, and it's awesome the way it's panoramic, and you move your phone around. You're like, okay, I know what it looks like from this seat, and I know it's going to look like down the left field line. I know what it's going to look like down the right field line. It's phenomenal. And all-in pricing. I hate those hidden fees at checkout when I'm buying tickets to any event, concerts, sports, whatever it is. Toggle on the all-in pricing and no surprise fees at checkout with Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets, NFL tickets, sports, comedy, theater, whatever it is, concerts near you. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Sticking with the offensive side of the ball, Croc. Running back, the 49ers are number 1, and that is, of course, buoyed by Christian McCaffrey, 90.6 grade, according to Pro Football Focus. You got the best running back and the best fullback in the league because, fullbacks count for this as well. So Juszczyk, Mitchell, Mason, this is the best group in the NFL, and when the best running back in the NFL doesn't come off the field, it's pretty easy to see why you've dominated that. What did I say, 90.6? 90.3 is the PFF grade for Christian McCaffrey. Good in the pass game, good in the run game. You know where Christian McCaffrey is not great, though? Great
pass blocking?
28.4 and 30.2 as a pass blocker and a run blocker, according to PFF. So there you go.
Which the interesting thing there is typically they'll tell you to, for a lot of these running backs to make the squad and all that, like you have to be able to pass protect. And it sounds like he's kind of terrible at it. Now, again, he does everything else extraordinarily well, but for most running backs, you would never get to the point where you see him do everything extraordinarily well, because if he can't pass protect, he would never see the field. And that was a big thing with one of those running backs early on over the last few years, where it's like, he's struggling in pass protection, so they just don't play him.
Only 56 pass blocking reps for Christian McCaffrey out of his 1,000 snaps. So when it's a passing play, McCaffrey's in the route. So I think that's why it doesn't really matter for him if he's a good pass blocker or not, because they want him in the route and they want to throw him the ball. They don't want him in there blocking anyway.
And the other running backs, you kind of touched on them, but Elijah Mitchell, I think Elijah Mitchell is a good back. And I think if he could stay healthy, he'd be a good starting back somewhere else, right? Like he's legit. I think a lot of people were high on Jordan Mason, JP Mason, and what he could do at the running back spot, at least be a bruiser, and was like, man, can he get any more touches? Obviously, we haven't quite seen that. So I could see why they'd be high on the 49ers, because it almost feels like whether it's the scheme or just the guys that they have, everybody has had an opportunity to really be productive.
Mason and Elijah Mitchell also grade out very well. Mason top 8 on the 49ers offense, 84.7 overall grade. Not great pass blocker either, according to them, but as a runner, 85.4 grade for Jordan Mason, and then Elijah Mitchell pretty good as well in the 70s. And for this isn't like Madden grades either. If you're in the 70s, that's a pretty good grade according to Pro Football Focus. So that is the 49ers running back group. Shouldn't be surprised they rank high. There might be some surprises out there. Are you shocked that wide receiver, the 49ers are also number 1 in the entire NFL, Croc? Ayuk, Debo, Jennings, and a team total grade of 91.0 for the wide receiver group. The 49ers wide receivers, number 1.
I think seeing so many guys so high, and again, I love the receiver group. I think they work very well together. You talked about the offensive line and how, man, I could see them being higher because, they just play well together, even if there's not one guy that plays out of his mind. Well, the receivers, there have been guys that play out of their minds at different points. We had a 1,400-yard season from Debo Samuel. He was an all-pro. We just had an all-pro season from Brandon Ayuk. And then you have Juwan Jennings, who obviously doesn't get near the amount of opportunities as other guys, but he plays well in his role, really good blocker and all that. But our guys playing as well consistently because of how good the scheme is. And it goes back to Kyle Shanahan. It goes back to, the quarterback being efficient and being able to do what Kyle wants him to do. But just guys that are grading out so high. And it's not to say that they don't have ability. I love all these guys. But, 1 and 2 in, a lot of these different categories, how do you not start to look at the guy that's really the puppet master behind all of this?
And PFF, they do a pretty good job, and they try hard to isolate things and try to take other aspects out of it and just grade the player on what he's asked to do and what's in front of him and the job he does on every single snap. But it's everything, Croc, in my opinion. It's Kyle Shanahan, such a good coordinator. It's a great scheme. And then the receivers are good because the scheme is good, and the quarterback is good, and the quarterback is good because the receivers are good, and the scheme is good, and it just all works together. The entire chain is rock solid. And aside from maybe if you point to some offensive line hiccups here and there, which the 49ers negate because the scheme is predicated on quick passing, getting the ball out quick, and the quarterback does a great job of getting the ball out quick. That's kind of negated if you do have some issues on the offensive line and pass protection at times. So it all works together because the entire chain is strong and every link of the chain is strong. And I think that's why everybody kind of plays up, and you can't just point to one thing because the players themselves are doing their job really well, but everyone else around them is doing it really well too. And it helps them and it all helps each other. And so, it's just a well-oiled machine right now on offense for the 49ers.
The question was, am I surprised to see the receivers that high? And I would say, nah, I maybe have to look at like a list. I think I really like what the Houston Texans have over there. You got Diggs. We know he could play very well. You got guys like Tank Dell. Nico Collins was 1,300-yard receiver last year. And they had Noah Brown looking like he was a potential all-pro when he was out there on the field and healthy and, similar scheme. You have a talented quarterback. You're getting a lot of protection out of receivers. You add Stephon Diggs to the mix. I don't know where they are on the list, but I'd assume that between them, Miami Dolphins, those are a couple of teams that should be kind of high on that list as well.
I mean, you have to credit the scheme too. And so all these coaches that coached together and worked on this scheme, the Shanahan tree, the McVay side of the tree as well. Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur, McDaniels. You got Slowick now. Kevin O'Connell's doing work, right? And now the Atlanta Falcons have a branch from the McVay side of that tree as well. Like it's spread around the league, and the guys that coach directly with Shanahan and McVay have been, there's just such a high hit rate, and all those offenses are so well organized. And and for the 49ers, they've got the personnel on top of it. And so it's phenomenal to see all that come together right now with the 49ers. By the way, Brandon Ayuk, second highest graded player behind Trent Williams on the entire team, 91.5 grade. Deebo Samuel, number 7 on the entire squad with an 85.4 grade last year.
Pay BA.
Pay BA, yeah. Juwan Jennings, number 11 on the entire team as well. And by the way, like I mentioned, Juwan Jennings, pass blocking grade, run blocking grade, receiving grade, all good. Where are we at next? Did we finish the offensive side? Yeah, so that's the offensive side of the ball. There hasn't been quarterback rankings, but, the quarterback rankings are kind of just one player. I think that's probably an episode we might have to do. We talked about Brock Purdy, Croc, as he, what his place is in 49ers history right now after just 1.5 seasons, going into year 3. He's already on our list, pretty darn high. Where should he rank amongst NFL quarterbacks? Maybe that's a future episode, Croc, we're going to have to hammer out here as we approach training camp and preview position groups, and we'll be previewing quarterbacks, and it's a short group to preview. So maybe we'll rank Brock Purdy in the league there. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball, Croc, and where PFF has the 49ers graded only one team better than the San Francisco 49ers in the entire NFL on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get to it next. Talking about sound schemes, Croc, that Shanahan defense we've been talking about a lot the last couple of years, and I believe we were first to call it that too. So nobody tried to take credit for the Shanahan defense. Bobby Saleh doing some things over in New York as well. The 49ers, number 2 defensive line in the NFL, number 2 linebacker group in the NFL, number 2 defensive backs, number 2 secondary in the entire league, Croc. That one shocked me a little bit. Number 1 in all 3 categories, the New York Jets.
Now, okay. See, this is when I start to have some issues, right? I listen to not just 49ers talk, and really when I say 49ers talk, I really kind of just only listen to us. You and I, we, have conversations about these things. I see what people are, I have my ear to the streets, right? Social media, so to see what they're saying. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people, they've been talking bad about Bob Saleh over there on the Jets. And I think his issue is Zach Wilson was his quarterback. He tried to move on from Zach Wilson. Aaron Rodgers got hurt, and Zach Wilson had to be his quarterback again. And some other guys, we don't even know their names, right? So that's been his biggest issue. But when you talk about coaching and coaching that side of the ball, and I can see how Jeff Ulbrich, people haven't been talking about him being a head coaching candidate. He's a defensive guy. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for them, but I could see that in the near future as well. They are doing a hell of a job over there, a hell of a job coaching up that defense. That's for sure. So to hear that they're number 1 in all 3 levels of the defense, good stuff. Good stuff. Very well coached squad.
So the problem I have with those rankings is linebacker, and they actually said in their write-up that if it wasn't for Dre Greenlaw's injury, the Niners actually probably would be number 1 instead of number 2. So when you talk about Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, and the depth that the 49ers have now that they've brought in behind that, so the Niners probably, when everyone's healthy, have the best linebacking group in the NFL. But with Greenlaw out, the unknowns there, the New York Jets got the nod at linebacker over the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the other 2 defensive backs, and by the way, looking at grades here, second highest graded player on the 49ers defense, that is Fred Warner, 90.0. The only guy better was Nick Bosa at 92.2. And those are 2 of the top 4 grades on the entire team there on the defensive side of the ball there for Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, and those grades should shock nobody. Defensive line graded number 2 in the entire NFL, Croc. And Bosa's doing a lot of heavy lifting there, 92.2 grade. Javon Hargrave, I thought was mildly disappointing. He wasn't terrible for the 49ers last year, but I expected more. 74.9 was his grade, which is not a bad grade. I think he's probably going to have a better season this year than he had last year for the 49ers. But after those two guys, I don't really know where you hang your hat on the 49ers defensive line. I think some things really have to go right, especially with the new guys they brought in, right? No more Eric Armstead. The blueprint is gone. You got Malik Collins on the inside. You brought in Leonard Floyd. Those guys' grades last year for their respective teams were 58 and 60, so they're not coming off of phenomenal seasons according to the PFF grades. And, it's not gospel with the grades as well, but I don't think this is one of the stronger defensive lines the 49ers have had in recent years. They're going to need some help there. The veterans are going to have to play well that I just mentioned, and the depth, there's going to be some guys that really need to show up and maybe play better than they have, better than I expect them to. Yetur Gross-Matos needs to show more as a pass rusher, however they use him. Can Chris Kosaric unlock something there that has previously not been unlocked with him as a big end, or maybe even a rusher from the inside, as we've seen with some recent free agent additions to the 49ers defenses in years past? Beal, Drake Jackson, one of the young guys have to step up too and create something off of the edge.
I think it is partly the young guys, but I did see a chart yesterday. I want to say I tweeted it out or quote tweeted it, and I think I put the interesting. The 49ers were one of the highest, if not the highest. They were like, it's one of those charts where you want to be up and you want to be to the far right.
Yeah.
Well, they were up high and to the far right when it came to pass rush with a blitz and pass rush pressures. Pass rush pressures with a blitz and pass rush pressure without a blitz. They were really high. Now, maybe they didn't quite get home, but you are talking about a defensive line as a whole that was able to generate pressure, whether they were just rushing 4 or if they were sending 5. All right. I would only assume this year that either improves a little bit or stays remotely kind of the same. And Peacock right now, if you're watching on YouTube, he is bringing up the chart. So you can kind of explain the chart and what we're looking at right now for the folks that are not watching it live.
Yeah, so basically the 49ers had the best pass rush in the NFL when they brought the blitz. And the other axis is pressure rate when not blitzing. And the 49ers were 4th best in the league there. So when they didn't bring the blitz, they had a top 4 pressures. So this is pressures generated. So they were top 4 in the league in pressures generated when they didn't blitz. And when they brought the blitz, they were number 1 in the league in pressures generated. So they brought pressure last year, and maybe they didn't get home in sacks, and maybe it feels like it wasn't quite as good as this, but I think it also points to the 49ers, like their mission statement when Lynch and Shanahan showed up was like, we're going to have the best defensive line in the league. We're going to put our resources in the defensive line. And like, I can't fault that. And I kind of wanted them to draft the defensive lineman in the first round this year too. It's like, yes, keep it coming. Be amazing on the defensive line.
I think also the part to this is just the expectations and standards of the defense.
Right.
It's just so sky high that any type of slight fall off, and we're talking about a team going from, hey man, we got the number 1 defense in the league to, oh my goodness, they're number 6 in the league. This is a disaster, right?
Yeah.
Like still a top 10 unit. That is not good enough. I think this speaks volumes to that because there were a lot of grumblings. There were a lot of upset fans out there with how the pass rush really was going throughout the year.
Last group here, defensive backs, Croc, number 2 secondary in the entire NFL. That one just surprised me a little bit. I didn't expect the PFF to give the 49ers that much love, partly because one of the newcomers, Isaac Yiadom, had an 80.4 grade last year. Highest graded player in the secondary for the 49ers last year was Charvarius Ward, 86.5. Diamador Lenore had a solid grade last year as well. He was the number 7 defender with a 75.8 grade. So PFF clearly likes the 49ers defense. They love a bounce back for a healthy Talanoa Hufanga at safety this year as well. And so I think maybe I was sleeping potentially on what to expect, because I just didn't expect the 49ers to be the number 2 graded defensive backfield in the NFL.
I didn't either, and for good reason. I mean, you look at some of the other defenses around the league and what they did. Now, again, I'm speaking from a somewhat ignorant standpoint, not knowing the PFF grades of some of these teams, but just watching them and what it felt like, man. Would I take the 49ers secondary over Cleveland Browns? Now, okay, first, let me start with the 49ers, because this was a big conversation on social media, and I was like, we'll discuss this on today's episode. Everybody's really excited about Deommodore Lenoir, right? Fans, team, everyone. Everyone is really excited about how Travaris Ward played. This was a guy who was an all-pro. We also have seen Talanoa Hufanga being an all-pro as well, and obviously he's coming off of an injury. But between those 3 guys, those 3 starting in your secondary, where you feel very confident about what they bring, now it's like, hey, there's just 2 spots that you kind of have to fill in. And the other safety spot and the nickel spot, to me, that comes off as a defense that's pretty strong. And then you add a guy, like you said, Isaac Yiadom, a guy who graded out at an 80, in coverage. Like, that is hella good. So now you throw him into the mix. This is a very good, well-rounded defense. But again, a lot of it is going to be predicated on how well do the safeties play, especially Talanoa Hufanga coming off of an injury. All right. So you see them at 2. It shouldn't be that surprising, because this is a group that has shown they can play well. The surprising part for me is some of the guys that they were over, the Cleveland Browns. I mean, Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, Juan Thornhill, Emerson, Greg Newsome, like just that group, we saw what they did to the 49ers. Like they were really good. And how much did Myles Garrett have to do with that? Maybe a decent amount, but those guys, they play man coverage. They're sticky. They're going to turn up. They're going to celebrate. They cause fits against the 49ers. The Baltimore Ravens, we saw what that secondary did against the 49ers. Marlon Humphrey, they got Kyle Hamilton. They got Marcus Williams, Brandon Stevens, even Mullet in the slot. Like those guys, there's a conversation. You got the Miami Dolphins. I like what they got as well. Jalen Ramsey, Javon Holland, he's terrific. Jordan Porter, he's terrific. Kendall Fuller. I mean, there are some really good secondaries that have the 49ers ranked over. But again, I don't think it's a no-brainer, because a lot of the comments that we're seeing are, oh, this is too high for the 49ers. And it's like, okay, well, why is it too high? I don't know. It just feels too high.
Yeah.
There is a conversation to be had, whether you have the 49ers maybe at 3 or 4, maybe at 2 like they do. I do think it's more of a conversation than just, it just feels too high for the 49ers. Unless you're thinking Talanoa Hufanga comes back and he is not good. And now you have issues, because who the hell are these safeties? Who's going to play for the 49ers?
And by the way, Jair Brown graded higher than Hufanga when they were on the field last year. Jair Brown, solid. Like, he was only behind Bosa, Warner, Ward, and Armstead as far as total grades on defense for the 49ers last year, according to PFF. 77.9 overall. Solid run defense, solid coverage grade as well for Jair Brown. So it's kind of like everybody grades pretty well of the starting 5. And so I think that's why it kind of raised their grade a little bit. It didn't. And they're kind of beholden to their grades when it's PFF putting out the rankings. So I think that's why they ended up with a higher grade than maybe some people expected in the secondary. But again, I mean, when you look at it like this, and the 49ers are literally 2 or 1 in every position group except for offensive line and quarterback. And, the 49ers are fine at quarterback. It's when you got all the rest of those players on the rest of the team. So this kind of goes to show you what this team's put together. And a lot of people hate on PFF, but PFF loves the 49ers. So there you go.
Sounds like a team that should be Super Bowl favorites.
Kansas City Chiefs, by the way, my last check-in at FanDuel, the Chiefs caught up to the 49ers. They're now even. Both teams, 6-1 odds to win the Super Bowl next year. So money's coming in on the Chiefs there at FanDuel.
I ran into someone, they asked me, they're like, hey, Croc, what do you think about the 49ers and their chances to get back to the Super Bowl? And I'm like, the tough thing is I think they had as good of a chance last year as they will ever. And I'd only assume that the Chiefs get better. So you couldn't beat the Chiefs at their kind of quote unquote lowest in the Super Bowl run that they've been on, it will be more challenging to beat them. Even if you get better, they've gotten better as well.
And things went well for the 49ers last year. Injuries, things like that. Like, so much can happen over the course of the season. So it was absolutely their best opportunity last year. Window's still wide open, but you got to do it again. And that's difficult in the NFL, as good of a roster as the 49ers have. All right, everybody be safe out there. Don't blow off your hands. We'll talk to you next week right here. Locked On 49ers.